one of the things you hear a lot is like hire A players, so that they also bring in like other A people. But what you don't hear a lot is how hard it is to find those A people. Um, and so you have to like be able to look beyond like the skill sets, like the for lack of a better way of putting it, like the technical skill set they have at the time, and be looking for say certain personality traits. Is this person does this person have a history of solving problems? Does this person have a history of um say being working in places where like their empathy was tested? um does this person you know kind of have the ability to kind of go the extra mile? Can this person sacrifice the next 2 to 4 years of their life building this thing with you? It's it's like a it's almost like a complicated thing that you have to figure out over time.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of The Build by Vizible. I'm Yemi, and my co-host today is Dami, as always. We have an amazing guest today who is called Joseph. Hi Joe, how are you doing? Joseph Benson-Aruna.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Like
he has a
name, just so you know.
yeah. Joe has an amazing background and then currently works as a partner at DFS Labs. And rather than me try to talk about his background, I think it would be great for you to share more about your background with us, Joe, and how you got into tech.
Yeah. Thanks, Yemi. And thanks, Dami. Thanks for having me on here. So I, I, I don't know. Talking about how I got into tech is normally like a long, normally like a long thing. But I think I'll start from kind of uni. So in uni, I kind of got into um, design, graphic design. I had a friend, Timmy, who was, into like computers generally, fixing computers, doing graphic design work, writing code. And so we got close, and kind of I got into that. And then I think going into my third year in uni, I met two friends, Eroiso and Obaru, who were building like a startup. And so that was like my first, kind of first introduction to like startups and how they work and things like that. And it just kind of opened me to like a whole new world. And it was from there that, I got really into like product design and product management. Um, and then, I just, I think by my third day in uni, I had stopped going to classes, and I was like, oh, you know what? Um, I'm just going to stop pursuing this engineering degree and do whatever work there is. I wasn't like the typical, oh, I have this great startup idea and stuff. I just didn't enjoy my engineering degree anymore at that point, and I was like, I'll just go and start working. And it was like, graphic design, product design. And then, I was lucky. I would say like, to a large extent, I was lucky. I started doing, user experience design like very early. Like many people weren't paying attention to it at that point in time, but it seemed like something that really exciting um, at the time. And then I, got started like a small kind of design studio with my friend Leke, and we decided like, oh, we're going to build, we're going to help startups with design, and then because we knew that they won't be able to pay us, we are like, oh, we're going to like take some equity, and then help them out. And actually, prior to that, I had gone to a startup weekend event in 2011, and I had met some guys, Constance and Celestine, who like, and we worked on this idea, Ticket Mobile at the time. And, it was like, oh, this is going to be a proper startup. And, I did a ton of design work there, some product thinking work there. And so that really helped, like, kind of frame, um, give, like, yeah, it helped me better frame the idea of how to work with startups and things like that. And so when I started my thing with Leke, we called it UIX at the time. Um, we're just like, oh, we're going to work with startups. But then we had to put food on the table. And so we got this guy who was supposed to like finance us and help us get side gigs that would actually pay the bills. And for some, for a bunch of reasons, I think that was like my first time working with like, someone who's like an investor. That did not work out. And then we had to get jobs. And luckily for us, I think we had spoken to, Bankole from Tech Cabal, like quite very easy, like early on. And then he was doing stuff with Jobberman and he was like, oh, you guys should come and be part of this. And then the Jobberman guys were like, oh, you guys should join full time. And so that was it. And so Jobberman was what I'll say was like my first real like product design role. And it was like, I think my role there was like product manager, user experience. And Jobberman at the time, and I think up till now, but at the time was like really like this, big platform. We had like lots of users. And so I had like this free reign to like do anything. And I learned so much, like, knowing that design is not just like drawing rectangles and, and adding color. It's like a lot of, looking at how people really use stuff, looking at a lot of data, working like with real product managers in terms of thinking of features and things like that. And so it was like a really great starting point. Um, and so I think after a while, I joined the VConnect. And VConnect at the time was trying to build like kind of like a, how will I put it, almost like a Foursquare for Nigerian businesses. Um, and I was there for a while, worked with Constance and Samuel, like worked with, it was a great experience. And then after that, I began my journey into fintech. I joined InterSwitch, and that was also like a very great role. I think it was the first time they had hired like a proper user experience designer, um, and InterSwitch had like this, suite of products, and it was like a great opportunity to just learn about a lot of stuff, know about how the payment industry works. Um, Worked on a ton of projects at InterSwitch. At the time, it was also like a great opportunity to come up with like we started myself and my colleagues that's Francis and Leslie. We started thinking of how to build a design system, and a lot of these things were like early. It's like way before any other person was thinking about it here because it was again people didn't pay like a lot of attention to like design at the time, and over time like it just evolved. I remember, working with Okpe Adeoye, who is like the CEO of One Pipe right now. He was a product manager at InterSwitch at the time, and I was like, okay, I really want to be a proper product manager. Um, and I think from there I just evolved into like working like a bunch of roles. I joined Team Apt, did a ton of design, did ton of product thinking, um, and then during my time at TeamApps, McKinsey was working on a project to build a digital bank in Nigeria. And then I got recruited to the team. Uh, you know, I had a lot of experience in fintech already, and so it was like just an easy transition. But again, you learn a lot of things. Did a ton of design work. Did again a bunch of product thinking. Like worked very closely with the product managers, um, and then we worked on a bunch of projects. After like the one in Nigeria, there's one in SA and stuff like that. And then I was like, you know what? I'm tired of working in in like kind of like a big organization. I think I miss like the startup life and stuff. And so there was an opportunity at Carbon, and I was like, okay, it was called Pay Later at the time. And I was like, okay, this is a great opportunity. I'm going to like join them. And again, great experience. Did a ton of, again, user experience research, user experience design, um, a lot of data gathering. It was just like, really exciting stuff. Um, and but during my time at McKinsey working on the project in Nigeria, um, I met John, who was at the time working on wallets, and we got close and we started going back and forth on the idea, and I was helping him a ton, in product thinking, in like the business side of things, trying to think of operations, trying to think of a bunch of like other things. And I was like, he kept like saying, you should join, you should join, you should join. Um, but at the time, I didn't think I was ready to take the leap. And so um, after some time at Carbon, I was like, I want to try something else. It's kind of, I there's like some personal stuff on the personal side, and I felt like I need to revamp my life or something. Um, And so I was consulting for a former colleague who was at McKinsey and was now building her startup in Ghana. And then, helped out on the product and design side. And then finally, John just like kind of got to me and I was like, okay, what the heck, I'll just join. And so we started building wallets together. Um, and that's pretty much what I did for a long time. I know, as you can imagine, building a startup from very early on and trying to grow is like a whole, different experience. It was great. Like learned a ton of stuff. Stuff around hiring, just operations generally, getting to the point where it's like, oh, this is no longer like a tech startup anymore. This is like becoming a financial institution. And it was at that point that I was like, okay, we need more capable hands, to do this for us. And at the time, I was like, I think I have to move on from here, to do other things. And then I left and I worked on a bunch of projects with, at this time, I was just like consulting for a bunch of other people who were building their stuff. Um, Worked with, the guys at Triumph on a bunch of products. Worked with the guys at Dots Bank, to help kind of crystallize the initial idea. Um, and then joined the guys at Split to help them build out their product and technology team. But all this while, I just had this feeling like, I think the ultimate thing I want to do is just be in a position where I get to work with a ton of startups, um, and just like experience at the very early stages and help like founders kind of understand like their product, their market, their operations, help them figure stuff out very early so they don't make some of the mistakes I had seen startup founders make, and some of the mistakes I had made myself. And so it was just like serendipity, if I put it that way, and the DFS Lab opportunity came along. Um, and then I joined DFS Lab, and that's where we are today. So like, long, long story, long story short about DFS Lab today.
Yeah, that's a long journey. It's like you've done bits of everything. When you were saying that for you, design was more than just boxes and colors, I was like, Joey speaking to Dami spirit animal.
I can really resonate with that. So I was just like, this is my person. This is maybe this is the journey that I'm going to take. Who knows? Maybe I'm looking at
Dami is
myself in like
crazy
5 years.
people. I
What do you
promise.
say?
I said you're one of those crazy people. The way he did the engineering 360, Dami did it 360, where she entered school to study economics, got out, and then she's like, right after Tech Plus, I want to be tech.
Legit, legit. Like I actually was going to do like a master's in economics, and I just ended up just dropping out of that and just like going to find some tech related
Yeah.
masters to pursue. I can really resonate with your journey. I'm really excited about this conversation now. Like I was excited before. Now I'm like, oh my god, this is my person. This is gonna be fun. So you actually spoke about your experience co-founding a startup.
Yeah.
Which isn't really popular knowledge like that. We thought we're going to exclusively talk about that, but you already spoke about that, which is great.
Mhm.
So I wanted to maybe just dive a little deeper into what that experience was like. Yeah, well, like how was it? Like, you played different roles. You worked at a bigger company. You worked like as an operator in a startup, and then you kind of just moved to co-founding your startup. How was like that, experience different from your previous experiences?
Yeah, so um, I think like the biggest thing lots of people don't realize when it comes to like co-founding a startup or like founding a startup is you you have, I think like personally, I think it's like it boils down to two things, right? Product and people, right? You you it's a totally different experience. You realize like, you have to build this product, that people actually want to use, and people are willing to pay for, because you have to be like a proper business. You have to start earning money, and then you have to deal with people. So you have to deal with people, your customers, your staff, and your investors. Like there's just a ton of people to deal with, um, and I I I think it was. I consider myself to be a pretty level-headed person and like calm person, but then you get tested on, on so many levels, like when it comes to dealing with people when you're running your startup. But it boils down to like learning how to manage people. So like building a great product and then learning how to manage people. I think that's what it boils down to. Um, so managing people, your customers, especially if you're building like a fintech app that involves like people's money, you realize how iffy people are with their money, and like personally you're also like that, but you think like, oh, it's my money, like, oh, this bank debited me, I need to get my money back. And then when you're on the other side, you're like, calm down now. We're solving this, we're fixing this. Um, and so, having a lot of empathy for your customers, having a lot of empathy for your staff. I think that we're very lucky at Wallets because we had people, you know, and that's like when people ask me what the best part about building a startup really is, I think for me it was like it boiled down to the people, and especially the people I got to work with. You had people, putting in like long hours, being in the office at like ridiculous times, um, making commutes that were like very uncomfortable, but like they were showing up like every day. Um, and just looking at that and seeing how much people were willing to sacrifice to build this product with us was like really humbling. And it made me, I'd say like it made me, kind of like a better manager, overall, like, and just a better person overall. um so I think that was like a key thing, just the empathy, like getting empathy. And many people don't realize is many founders don't realize is this startup you're building is your own, is your dream, right? It's your baby. The people you are working with or your employees, it's not generally like their cup of tea, right? So they also have like their own life goals and things like that. And a key part of your job is to make sure that your dreams kind of align with theirs, right? It's like, yeah, you want this thing to succeed, you want this thing to be like, a really big business. But for them, you have to understand what's important to them. Do they also want to go and build their own business? Do they want to work in like a different field entirely? You have someone join you as a customer service person, but then maybe the person's real strength is in product management or some kind of operational role, and you have to help them grow into that if you want to keep them around for long. And just kind of learning all those things is like really important. On the people side for customers is like just empathy generally. If someone was complaining to you about something, you're like, it's very easy to like say, oh, we're sorting it out. But then it's a different ballgame when you put yourself in their shoes and you're like, okay, I understand, what you're going through. I remember getting on calls with customers where, they're really, really pissed, and I had to figure out the way to like, to like say, what, okay, this is, yeah, we're really working on it, and I totally understand you. I get your point of view. I'm really sorry this is happening, and just helping them walk through that, and then working to make sure like that thing was really fixed. So I think those are like the two things, like just the product and the people.
Really amazing points that you shared, honestly. Like this is like the same thing we heard from our previous conversation. I think you really spoke to the importance of like your team
Yeah,
in building the product, especially your founding team.
yeah.
So what advice would you give for somebody that is currently trying to figure out their founding team?
So one of the things you hear a lot is like hire A players, so that they also bring in like other A people. But what you don't hear a lot is how hard it is to find those A people, and so you have to like be able to look beyond like the skill sets, like the, for lack of a better way of putting it, like the technical skill set they have at the time, and be looking for, say, certain personality traits. Is this person, does this person have a history of solving problems? Does this person have a history of working in places where like their empathy was tested? Does this person have the ability to kind of go the extra mile? Can this person sacrifice the next 2 to 4 years of their life building this thing with you? It's like it's almost like a complicated thing that you have to figure out, over time. But then it's just looking beyond like the technical skill set and looking at like the personality of the people you're getting on board. You can have like a very smart person, or like a very talented person join your team. And for many startups, it's like it's just inevitable. You need to put in, the work, and you are going to do more than you initially signed up for, and so you're looking like, is this person going to be able to spread themselves thin? Um, it's it's a it's a combination of factors like that, and then very importantly, you have to think of, and people say this a lot, but I don't think we pay a lot of attention to that. It's like, what kind of company are you trying to build? What kind of culture are you trying to build? Does this person fit into like that culture? Um, there are times like we didn't hire someone because even though they were really good, but because we just felt like this person was going to kind of throw off the balance of the culture that we had. Like, if, for example, you're at a point where everyone had to be working long hours, you didn't want to like bring in someone who, during your conversations with them, made it very clear that once it is five, it is five. I'm going home, or like it ends. Don't reach out to me, which is like a very valid stance. But then, looking at where your company is at the time, it just doesn't work for you, and so you wanted to make sure like you weren't like for us, it was just important that we weren't bringing in someone who was going to kind of throw off that balance. Um, but on the other hand, you had to be able to make certain concessions. Like right now, working from home is very popular. But I remember at the time we decided like, oh, you only had to come to work. I think it was on Mondays and Fridays, if I remember correctly. And even on days when you had to come to work, it was okay to come to work at 10 a.m. because we just understood like the commutes, like people had to, um, kind of get into to get to work, and then they'll be exhausted, and then many times they would have to leave really late. And then we had like a place where people could sleep and stay like overnight if they wanted to. So I think like I think it just boils down to like personality traits and the kind of culture you're trying to build in the company. So and if you have to make a concession, you have to like really think about it. I remember we had an engineer, really really great guy, um, but he was like really nonchalant in the initial stages, and then we had to kind of figure out how to work with him. Um, and we kind of realized that it wasn't like a it was just this person like looking back like over time it's like he just had like this like interesting personality and it fits like very well into the culture, but initially there was just like that kind of this person is a very nonchalant person. But at the end of the day, he got stuff done. He would walk like when other people were not even walking. Like it was, just going beyond like the thing you can see initially, like the, maybe technical prowess and maybe like that initial um personality trait that they show and just kind of trying to look deeper. Um, which goes back to like, trying to like hire, not be in a rush to hire, right? I think one of the things my co-founder and I, you know, held on to at the time was like, we'll try to a, we'll try to hold a certain role for as long as we could, until we knew that we had to hire, like we inevitably had to hire for that role. So if we're going to hire like a marketing person, one of us had spent so much time, doing all this stuff that was required, that when we're going to bring someone in, we knew the kind of person we wanted, we knew what's the job required, all that kind of stuff. It's a bit different for like something like legal or accounting, of course, but um from lots of the other roles in the startup, there are roles that you can hold yourself, and just hold for as long as possible till you find the right person that just fits right into it. And again, you're not looking at the pure technical skills, you're looking at, can this person function, as part of this system that I'm trying to build.
It's really amazing. So much gems. I was just taking notes. Yeah, you spoke about a lot of interesting things. And so now I'm just a little curious to know what led to you leaving the startup world as like a founder.
I think a bunch of reasons. First of the fact that we're building a fintech, and at a certain point in time, if it stops being like a fintech and starts being like a proper financial institution. And at the time, I just felt like we're at the point where we needed to get the right people, to hold certain roles. Like it was a thing where I was like, okay, I'm no more comfortable handling our finances, for example. Um, we probably need someone who's got a ton of experience working in, say, like a bank or in this same capacity in another startup who, help build this out. There was that. There was also the thing where, as time went on, this goes to like who you have as a co-founder, and you guys having certain conversations with each other and being truthful to each other. It became clear like my co-founder and I kind of didn't really want to build the same kind of business, right? Or the same kind of company, if I'm to put it that way. So there was how I felt like, oh, the company should be, and there was how we felt the company should be. And because we always had conversations with each other, it was clear that, oh, okay, yes, we need people to join and take over certain things. And at the same time, we're not agreeing on certain ways of running the business. Maybe it's time that one person steps away, and because he was like the he was like the main guy, if I'm to put it that way. It just made sense for me to like step out and just allow the company grow, because you don't you don't want a situation where co-founders have like varying opinions and they start leading the company in two different directions. Um, and so just having those honest conversations and being like, okay, I think it's best I leave. And anyway, I want to do this other thing anyway. So, it makes sense to leave. So yeah, that's like I think it boiled down to those two things.
Cool. Yeah, that must have been like a very hard conversation. And a very hard thing to realize, especially because like after you're done like building something, like after when you start building something, it's almost like your baby.
Yeah,
And it's like based off of like conversations, like just what you're seeing, being very introspective and honest with yourself,
yeah,
just admitting that like okay, seems like this might not work out.
yeah.
Almost like an actual breakup.
Exactly, exactly. Yeah, I, I see that, and I think this is important for solo founders who are looking to bring on like co-founders to join them. It's very
Right.
important that you understand that this is going to be like it's going to be like a marriage, right? There's You guys are going to have arguments. You guys are going to, have happy times. There'll be times when everything is going great. There'll be times when things are shit. It's very important to just, keep having conversations. If possible, have that one person or, one to three people who you guys, talk to, as a team, and who brings like, a lot of like, will I call it like, a lot of objectivity to the conversations, because it's very easy to get um emotional in many of these cases, and so just being having a lot of objectivity, having, very importantly, a lot of empathy, a lot of empathy for your co-founder, like understanding, you know, what they're going through, or where they're coming from, and things like that. It's like really important in making sure like the relationship works, and also being honest and truthful to each other when it's not working. It's okay to like, walk away. It's okay to go and do something else. And I tell that to like founders I work with, you know, don't make it messy, right? It doesn't have to be messy. It's just like, oh, okay, this is not working. There's something else I can go and do. Okay, let's have like a good conversation about this. If there's a board, present it to the board. If it's just two of you or three of you, just have those like really good like honest conversations, and keep the interest of the business above your own interests, right? It's not a thing of okay, this thing is not going my way, let's run it to the ground or something, something like that. It has to be like, um, at the end of the day, the business we're trying to build a business that outlasts us, right? So it's okay if one person wants to leave or has to leave. It's okay if, if you feel like one person is not pulling their weight, have a great conversation with that person and say, hey, um, this is what we think, this is what we've been seeing. And again, with a lot of empathy, right? With a lot of like, I understand what you're going through, I understand where you're coming from. And just be open to the idea that people will evolve, like your co-founders are going to evolve, even your employees are going to evolve, and you just have to like be prepared for all that and be able to walk through all that.
Yeah. So fast forwarding to your current role,
Yeah.
or just viewing your evolution into DFS Labs, can you maybe share a bit more about DFS and the evolution of your role? So it's just how you grew from founder, operator to investor, and then what bits of that experience were very handy for you?
Yeah. So I think the initial job description for this role was director of entrepreneur support. And everything on the JD kind of spoke to me as like, work with founders, help them figure out stuff, um, think of what businesses to invest in, um, find businesses to invest in, and then, um, work with those businesses to become like, to like, um, kind of become like proper, running operating companies and things like that. So it was, it was really attractive. And I think my colleagues, right, Jake and Steven, kind of like spoke to a ton of people and decided like, oh, we're going to split this into two roles. Like, so, um, I came in on the product side, and Osarime came in on the entrepreneur support side. And it was, it was a great experience. Like initially, the idea was just to talk a bit about DFS Lab. So DFS Lab is an early stage investment firm focused on investing in very early stage companies building on the digital commerce side of things on the African continent, like exclusively in Africa. And it's so we have that, that investment side, but we also have like a very strong consulting business, which is working with big firms and organizations to help them understand a lot of things about, like, working on on the African landscape, especially with relations to digital commerce, a bit of fintech, and so you know my job, especially in the early days, kind of was spread across like the consulting side and the investment side. And so initially it was like, work with founders on the product side of things, help them figure out products, help them understand, like, how their operations work. And not exclusively by myself. We have like a strong network of mentors and operators who we reach out to, and it's like, oh, there's this startup who's building this. We think it'll be great for you to work with the founders. And many founders have gone on to have like very great relationship with their mentors. And so initially it was like, come and work on that product side. But as time went, it's just obvious that, like, that's early. You realize that in many cases, many founders like have a solid idea of the product they're trying to build, right? They have a solid idea of the market they're trying to serve, and so most of the stuff they need help with, like really, it's not really like the obvious product stuff. You would still have those conversations, but many times around understanding why, maybe how to handle, like, certain customer issues, how to evolve now that the market has changed, if if things change along the way, or this co-founder is leaving, how do we manage that? Or this idea where we had originally, it's not working, how do we evolve? Or things are slow, how do we keep going? We're trying to raise money, how do we raise more money? So like a lot of stuff on the operational and fundraising side, actually. And then the also like the personnel side. So with customers, with co-founders, with investors, like managing certain conversations. And so generally my role just evolved into like working with them across like a bunch of all these things. In some cases, like market expansion. I'm trying to move from this market to this market. Who should I talk to? Do you know anyone there? Who can you introduce me to? So I think that's like that's like a ton of work I was getting to do. And then along the line, my colleague got a great opportunity to join another firm, and he left, and it wasn't like we're going to hire a new person because we're like a really small firm. It wasn't like we're going to immediately hire a new person. So it's like, okay, now like you just get to do everything, which has been like very interesting. Just getting to work with these founders and just help them through like the good times and and the not so good times.
I think I'm just a little curious to know, as somebody that has experienced life as an operator, as you're not managing a fund, as someone that actually you co-founded a startup in the past, how different are those three roles? Or being a founder?
Well, quite different. So to be honest, like I don't. So managing a fund is like, so there's managing a fund, like raising money, managing the LPs. That's like a ton of what the senior partners do here. And then I'm more on like the investment side, right? Like deciding what companies to invest in, what founders to work with. I think a ton of like the jobs is like before investing. It's like figuring out what kind of businesses to invest in. Lucky for us, we have like a very strong thesis. We know exactly what we're trying to invest in. what sectors we're trying to invest in. And so it's now down to like, are these the right founders to build this? Do we have, especially when you're coming in as early as we come in, right? It's like, do we trust that these founders or this founder, is going to be like the right person to build this kind of business? And in my time as a founder, speaking with investors, you almost had this thing of like, guy, you guys have this money, just give us just give us this money. We know what we are trying to build. But looking at it from the outside now, it's like, oh, a ton of things go into that. So you have to think of like the fact that you have to return multiples of the funds you've raised. You have a fiduciary duty to like to your LPs who have invested in the fund. And you don't just want to make the wrong bets, because at the end of the day, you're just making bets, right? But then you want to make very educated bets. You want to like, we do a ton of the beauty we do when we're investing in founders is like, around what kind of person is this person. If, for example, you're talking to a founder who's building a really interesting startup, but then it's like, oh, this person is, say, very flamboyant. It's like, okay, is this person just like a very naturally like showy person, and that's like just their personality, or is this person the kind of person that's just going to take all this money we're going to give them and go and do stuff in their personal life? Um, it's stuff like that that you have to consider. Like, is this person someone that has gone through like, they had stages of maybe building, even if they worked in a big company before, right? Have they kind of maybe handled projects on their own and kind of built stuff from scratch? And even now, how far have they gone before now asking for like external money, right? It's things like that that you have to consider. And so sometimes I wish like, oh, I could give every founder that reaches out like some money and say like, take and go and build. But then you have like really limited amount of money, and then you have to like say like, okay, what kind of person am I investing this in? Especially because this early, we've seen like many businesses will evolve from like this, the original idea they present to us and we invest in, and become, some of them will make like full on 180 like pivots. Some of them will slightly change their idea based on like, what they're seeing in the market as they try to find product market fits. And it's like, are these the kind of founders that can, kind of stand through those times and walk through them and like, still end up building successful companies? Those are like the kind of like things that you find on this side. They're like really different on the founder side. On the founder side, it's like you're just trying to build your business. You're seriously focused on your products, and when you're speaking to an investor, you just want them to give you the money, and you're not really like thinking about the fact that there's an IC and there are LPs, and like they have to really really think about this money they're about to give you. So even if it's like a $200 million fund, even they can't just randomly be giving out $1 million because they can easily do that. It's a lot of thinking kind of goes into it.
So you said in a perfect world, you would want to give every founder that reaches out to you money, but we're not in a perfect
yeah.
So you're not really able to do that. So I'm curious to know, like, how do you decide of all the companies, of all the startups that you get to interface with, how do you decide on what startups to invest in?
Yeah, so at the firm, it's like it's a thing where it's like, okay, first is this founder building a company that aligns with our thesis. That's the first thing. It's like, okay, yes, they are.
Sorry, before you go ahead, can you share a bit more on your thesis?
Okay, yeah. So, like I said, we're focused on digital commerce, and the basic idea is there's a ton of commerce on the continent that is happening on the continent that is not yet digitized, right? And we feel like there's a ton of opportunity there that go beyond, touching I would say the top, 5% of the population. So if you're building stuff in, say, logistics, right, or some kind of supply chain business or some kind of cash in, cash out business, you're touching like a higher percentage of the population. Lots of people want to move stuff. Lots of small businesses want to digitize and figure out how to run their businesses better. Lots of people are moving money offline, than online. And it's like, how do you plug into these opportunities in a way where you marry what's happening offline with the ideas that you have like for how online businesses should run. And very not quite long ago, my colleague Stephen wrote this article, which was like an evaluation of our thesis about building cyborgs and not androids on the continent. It's like properly marrying offline, behavior, customer behavior with like, the online solution that you're bringing and like building like a, solid business out of that. It's seeing, maybe like certain verticals and saying, oh, there's a ton of business happening here that is not, properly organized, or it's like not properly digitized. How do we build a solution that is not purely like, Amazon Prime-ish? How do we build like, a hybrid of both online and offline solutions to make sure like there's like, this is this whole system is more reliable, it's more efficient, and like, makes money for the business and makes life a lot better for like a ton of customers. So like that's generally it, right? So if your business aligns with that, then fine, right? That's the first step. The next step is, in many cases, how far along are you? We find that many of the best founders, especially the first time ones, are not necessarily just waiting to raise capital before setting out to build their ideas. People leave cushy jobs, they dig into their savings, they don't raise money from family and friends just to get their idea going. And so in many cases we want to see like some traction. You don't have to be like generating a ton of revenue or stuff like that, but we just want to see like you've actually you know left your seats and gone out to like say, okay, I'm going to like really build this thing. And so we want to see like some traction, like you're really like out there working with customers, making sales, trying to build something. And then it's like the founders. You as a founder, what have you done before? Who are you working with in terms of like what businesses have you been able to bring on board? Like how well have you done that? What kind of person are you? What do your past say like co-workers say about you? What do your colleagues say about you? Those kind of things. And then we have that conversation as a team, and the way it works at the labs, like all three of us have to agree that this is like the right decision to make. Is if it's like 2-1, then we like, and we can't convince like that other person, or the two other people can convince me, then it's like this doesn't go ahead. And there are cases where we've had founders who are not building, they've not like, they just have the idea, but then just in conversations with them, you like, and this is normally like multiple conversations. Many of these conversations with this kind of founders start off very will I say like informally. So like they just reach out and like, oh, I'm thinking of building this stuff. This is what I've learned so far. And then in speaking with them and like trying to help them like crystallize the idea, you get to work with them in a way, and then you realize like, oh, okay, this might not be like a wrong person to bet on. And so we've invested in certain companies that were just idea stage, right? But in many cases, it's mainly like, oh, you started something, you have some traction, and then you can say like, this is how far I've gone.
And so, you're one of the few people that I've met that has been a founder himself and that has worked so closely with founders. So I'm curious to know what your experience working with them has been like.
It's been interesting. I think at DFS we've been very lucky to invest in like I don't think that we've in terms of the founders we've invested in, I don't think we've invested in any wrong founder. We've invested in really good people, and it's been great working with like these people. And because of in many cases we come in so early that you're having multiple conversations with them weekly, or or bi-weekly, whatever it is, and you get to know them beyond like just like the business level. It's like you get to know them on a personal level, and it's been a great experience, especially when you don't try to put yourself in a position where you're like, oh, I know this business better than you, or like I understand this market better than you. Like the first thing like for us is like, nobody can run this business better than this founder, which is why we've invested in them, right? And so letting them know that they have that level of autonomy and control, like, oh, we're not coming to like change anything, we're here to support you, makes the conversations a lot easier. And even when they're like very hard conversations, we've had conversations with founders where it's like, this has been a good run, but maybe you should start thinking about winding down. And they are painful conversations, but they're also like, they're not like what's the word? They're not like conversations that are bitter, if I'm to put it that way. They're just painful. And in many cases, it's been like, you don't really need to shut down, but let's have this conversation about what happens if you need to shut down because of how things are going. And I'd say like in most of the cases, in fact, in all of the cases, no one has ended up shutting down. It's like we've figured out something, the founder has figured out something, like that works, and then the business can keep going. Maybe they've been able to raise extra capital. They've been able to like walk around something. Maybe let go of a bunch of people just to keep extend their runway and things like that. But it's been like I would say like overall it's been like a great experience working with founders. Just learning the different ways that different different founders approach different issues. Some people are really calm and like we're going to figure this out. It's fine. Some people are like, I'll have a conversation with you every day to like figure this out. um, you know, helping again. I think again having empathy is really important. Like just not seeing the whole thing from like a purely business perspective. Like it's like we're all human beings. There's like a lot of factors that that we don't have control over, and so it's like there's like there's the way business should go, but there's like a lot of human factors, a lot of environmental factors, and putting those into consideration while like having many of these conversations and working closely with these founders is like really key. And then just even building relationships outside of like the business relationship you have, like maybe meeting founders and not just talking about work, just talking about life generally. And sometimes they would like tell you stuff that they would not necessarily tell another investor. And then you have like this perspective and you're like, okay, I get it now. Okay, let's figure out how to make this work. Yeah. But yeah, so overall it's been great.
So Paul Graham, actually, I read this article in the past couple, like I think in the last 2 weeks or something. Have you read it? Where he was talking about as his experience being a partner at YC,
Yeah.
and about how like he's been able to learn from his users. So like the founders
Yeah.
that he's been talking to, and he's seen patterns over time. He's seen some patterns around like some of the things that separate the top founders from the rest,
Yeah.
and some of the things that mistakes that founders make that apparently they make the same mistake. Most people make the same mistakes.
Yeah.
So I'm curious to know, in your experience, first part of my question is, what are 3 traits that you can say separates the top founders you worked with or you've interacted with from the rest?
That's interesting because I remember like trying to kind of put this into. I have this note in my draft like where I was actually like trying to think about this. So I think like if I'm to boil it down to 3 things, I think the first one is passion. They're just really passionate about solving problems, right? And it goes beyond just particularly that product they're working on or that feature they're trying to build or whatever. It's like just generally they want to find solutions to things. And that's like one key thing I've seen, with many of the founders, like just being very, very passionate. Like they're very passionate about solving problems. The second thing is like there's this thing about just being open to learning, right? Constantly kind of evolving and just like saying, oh, yesterday I thought this was a great idea. Today I changed my mind because I've seen like a better way to do this. And so like they're constantly kind of learning how to like be better at whatever it is. So it could be like, managing customers, it could be like, working with their employees, it could be, thinking about how the market is evolving. They're like just constantly learning. And I think, tied into that learning is just the fact that what I'd say, so it's passion, it's, having an open mind and just like being able to learn. I think the third one for like, for most of them is like, it's going to be, I'd say like it's going to be empathy. And we have this thing where it's like many of the founders that we kind of put up there, empathy is not like some of like their strongest traits. But if you look at like the best ones, at the end of the day, you have to have some form of empathy. You have to be open to understanding like people around you on a very on a deeper level than just what you see on the surface. And be able to understand their opinions, be able to understand where they're coming from, be able to understand why they're doing what they're doing, which also like helps you like better understand your customers, which also helps you be like a better product person. So I would say like those 3 things: having being passionate about whatever it is, problem solving, being very open minded and like very open to learning, and then just generally having like empathy for people around them.
That's actually really great. So most of the things you mentioned, by the way, are non-technical.
Yeah.
They're not relating to how well you can, I don't know, create a product.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really important too, but like it's not relating to like how fast you can develop stuff and push it to market.
Yeah. So I think that like the technical stuff is like really great. But because as you evolve as a founder, you start to do you start to do less of the technical stuff. You start to deal with some more like people problems. It's key to have many of these traits, and many of these traits I mentioned, all like always tie into like some technical stuff. So, for example, if you're passionate about problem solving, then you're looking for like the best ways to solve engineering problems. You're looking for the most efficient ways to solve engineering problems. If you're open to learning, again, you're looking at, okay, how did this person do it? Okay, I'm going to talk to this person and learn how they figured stuff out, and stuff like that. And again, if if you're passionate, then of course you want to get things in the hands of your customers as quickly as possible, because you want them to experience it, and you think like this is like a very great idea, blah blah blah. And then if you show empathy, then you understand your customer problems, you understand the markets, you understand as things are shifting, you can see it from like a more human perspective. We like to talk about people thinking about things from some of the best founders. In short, most of the best founders, have like this first principle thinking, ability. And if you have these three traits, then you're probably like a very, solid first principle thinker, and you're able to like really solve problems from like, a from lack of a better, from an atomic perspective, if I have to put it that way. Yeah.
This Elon Musk's first principle thing. Right? I don't like since Elon Musk started talking about first principle thing. Everyone was like, "Oh, first principle." Don't mind me, but no, you made some really, really valid points. And so on the other side of the coin, what are some of the common mistakes that you see founders making all the time?
Oh, okay. I think the first one is just thinking like this is just going to be a breeze, right? I'm going to do it this way, and it's going to work this way. it's like just
First day of launch, you have like 1 million new customers. Everybody be shouting, "Wow, this guy can build!"
Yeah, it's just thinking that this is just going to go the way I want it to go. And many times things won't go the way you want them to go, right? The funny thing is that even though it's a flaw, it's kind of a flaw that you kind of need to have that flaw, like being just like overly optimistic, and being so, for lack of a better way to put it, being so full of yourself. You need that that flaw to be a founder, but at the same time, the best founders have kind of figure out how to manage it. Like, you're optimistic, but at the same time, you're really plugged into reality. So I think it's just like that's pure optimism, thinking that everything's going to go your way. The second one I see a lot of founders make is, I think it's still tied to like just the person. It's like thinking that you have all the answers, or like you should have all the answers because you're the founder. You don't have all the answers, and that's one thing that I took from just learning a lot, like first doing a ton of product management, and then just learning from like really good product managers, where it's like the best ideas are not just going to come from one person or the leader in the room. The best ideas are going to come from, they can't come from anywhere, right? They can come from a customer, they can come from someone on your team, in engineering, in customer success, in operations. Being open to those, to those ideas and listening to other people is really key. But many founders think that all the ideas should come from them, right? And so they make that mistake of, if I'm not the one that comes up with this solution, then it's not a valid solution, or then people won't think highly of me, as the person that runs this business, or people will respect my opinions, which is like not true at all. Like, so you have founders constantly like just spending so much time going in the wrong direction, just because they think that they are the ones that should be right all the time, right? And all the ideas should come from them. So I see like lots of founders make that mistake, and it's unfortunate. And then the third one is, I think it's it's just very closely, in a way, it's closely tied to the second one. It's like not understanding that you're actually building a business, right? You go out, you raise your pre-seed, you've raised a bunch of money, and not understanding that you have to turn this thing into a business as quickly as possible. Overestimating how much time you have in the early stage, especially as you try to figure out product market fit. You don't really have it. You don't have to think that you don't. It's important that you understand that you don't have the luxury of time. Lots of people forget that, and then it's like they are 1 month away from going dead, and then that's when they start realizing, and that's when they start trying to figure stuff out. And all this time they had spent money on the wrong things, or they had focused on the wrong things. It's a sad place to be. It's not like an irreversible place, but it's very important that as a founder, you are able to understand that you don't have that luxury of time. So many people forget that they don't have the luxury of time, and then before they know it, they're just out of time. And I mean, it's I think it boils down to that optimism of like, oh, I was able to raise, say 200K. It's going to be easy to raise the next, 1 million. And so you're not asking people questions about, oh, what should I be doing to make it easy for me to raise my next round? What should I be focused on? Um, and so they end up, just spending on the wrong things, and focusing on the wrong things. And then before they know it, they're out of runway. So yeah, I'll say like, kind of like those three things, just being um being too optimistic, thinking like they need to have all the answers, and then not realizing how little time they have.
Yeah, thanks. That's really helpful and kind of keys into one of my favorite things to talk about, which is the startup evolution process, which I think kind of ties to what you've said around growth and then spending money on the right things. And I think I personally feel that a lot of founders aren't actually equipped to even know what evolution should look like because it's beyond just growth. So I
Yeah.
speak with a couple of companies and I've spoken with some that they've gotten really great growth. Like you can't question the growth,
Mm-hmm.
but then suddenly you realize the founder is the best person at everything in the team
Yeah.
as a Series A business.
Yeah.
And that's a very bad sign because your job is to lead people,
Yeah.
not necessarily to do everything. Yeah. Now, there's a question we like asking when we have investors here, and everyone says, "Hey, I'm a parent. I like all my children the
Yeah.
same." But like we both know it's not like that. I know
You
my sister.
lie. There's always a favorite child.
You know that I know I'm not the favorite. Yeah,
I
but
know
we won't
I
put you
am.
too much on this one. Yeah, we both know you're not. But yeah, maybe if you can share on one of the favorite startups you've interacted with.
Yeah.
And then this could be a company you've invested in or one that you were unable to invest in, and just why that has been one of your favorite startups to interact with.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I agree with the fact that I'm going like it's in real life I have only one kid, so it's like that's my favorite.
Your favorite pair of sneakers.
So I think I'm going to. So there are. This is hard to choose, but I'm going to. There are two companies. There actually okay. So there are three companies. There's one that we didn't invest in, and then there are two that we invested in. So the two that we invested in, I'll start with one of them. GoBeba. Um, they are in they're based out of Nairobi, and they're kind of in the quick commerce space, and they they've they've been through it. That's how I'm going to that's how I'm going to put it. They've been through it, and one thing I'm like, I love the fact that there are many times when it's look like okay, this is the end, and for somehow, the founders figure out the way to make things work. And one I think one major reason why that is aside from the fact that both of them, Leslie and Peter, are very, aside from the fact that they're very, just great people personally and really want to build this business, is the fact that from the start, they've been really focused on fundamentals, right? They've been really focused on how do we make sure we're making money? How do we make sure like we're serving like the right type of customers and we're offering the right type of services? How do we keep staying alive even if we're not seeing the kind of growth that we want to see? And that's been, it's just been generally like really inspiring to see them just keep going and see the business just keep growing at a steady pace. It's one of those things where I'm like, I look up to these guys, right? Right. And I'll do anything to make sure like they are alive for as long as possible. But it's such a great set of such a great group of founders that they run the business like with so much passion, and they know what they want, right? They know what they're trying to build, and they built like a very solid business, and they're growing it. That's the one. I think the other one is Order. That's Guy. And again, it's basically almost the same thing, right? I remember when I spoke to Guy, it was a thing where it was like, oh, I'm tired of speaking with investors. um, um, I'm trying to grow this business. This is where it is at right now. Um, and we'll keep building, regardless. And, I've seen him kind of like turn that business around, like, pivot from his original idea into like something else and, like steadily grow that business. So even though like, there are a ton of businesses that I can't, if I could mention like, 10, I would like, keep going. I would say like those two stand out to me. Um, one of them has gone on to raise like bigger rounds. The other one is, still growing, but like these are like really, really great founders. Um, who, and in the case of Guy, he has like, that's from Other. He has built like a very, solid team around himself, right? As the business has grown, like a solid group of people who really believe in the business, who are really pushing. Like it's such a great thing to watch. The other one that we didn't end up investing in is Grey. They used to be Aboki.Africa. Um, and again, I think it's still at the end of the day, it always boils down to the founders, right? It's like I knew them when they like started out at Aboki.Africa, and I kind of felt like, oh, this is going to be like something that's it's going to end up being a great service. Lots of people end up using it. We didn't invest because number one, fintech is not like really really huge for us, and then we try to avoid places where we feel like there'll be regulatory gray areas. But they've built this business like very solidly over time. And I've kept in touch with like one of the co-founders. We have conversations once in a while, and it's just great to see how they've like built that business, grown their revenues, and just become like a go-to, for many people who need that service. Um, I'm was They released their mobile app, at one point, and within the first like day or so, it had like over 50,000 downloads, and I was like, oh, okay, like, lots of people really love this. Um, so just building stuff that people want and that really works, and just like keeping at it like over time. Um, I admire them for that. Yeah, so those three businesses, like startups I've interacted with.
I like to ask this question, especially to like investors, because y'all usually basically just have like good overall vision about what's going on in the industry. I'm curious to know
Yeah.
what are some of the verticals in the African tech space that you're curious about. What verticals are you curious about and interested in right now?
Mm.
Especially the underrated ones, the ones that you're like, I feel like this would be like there's something here, but I don't know.
Yeah, so my colleague Steven will be the perfect person to answer this question. Building up our perspective as a firm and just interactions with my colleagues and seeing the markets. We think like there'll be a bunch of like there'll be a lot of growth across different verticals, but we're excited about generally logistics. We think that there's so much opportunity there, but it's a very tough nut to crack, especially with the lack of infrastructure, right? And so we've invested in a bunch of firms, and we think like they're going to be able to figure out the way around this. So logistics is big for us. We think that um, a bunch of other verticals where there's a huge base to serve. So specifically, say construction. Um, like there's so much that happens offline in the construction space, um, and we think that there will be there will be people, the founders who build businesses that are able to like build solutions for that vertical. And then there's also like the health one. Like there's so much opportunity in like the health space, especially around um, like especially like the pharmaceutical space, right? Getting drugs to people who need them, and especially because it serves such a wide variety of people, and we think that there's so much opportunity there. I think the one that we've been excited about over time, and we still continue to be excited about, is food. Mainly because just looking at the stats, right? Lots of people spend money on food, and there's so much opportunity in that space. There's so much that can still be done. We've invested in a bunch of companies that we think are going to do like great in like that vertical, like either from like the maybe raw material side of things. Like, funny I have to say raw materials, but you get what I'm saying. Or to like the finished, the packaged product side of things. Like we feel like there's so much opportunity in food. and like you can make it, just generally make it easier to maybe like, source for like ingredients, make it easier to like offer, food, quality food, at a very affordable price point to like people. So like those verticals are like, verticals like, I'm excited about, and kind of based off, what we think of as a firm, and also like just conversations generally. So like food, construction, healthcare, logistics.
As you mentioned, that it just resonates with big spaces, big problems,
Yeah.
big solutions.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um,
Yeah.
what are maybe some of the things that I'd say maybe three things, just so we don't force you to give us 10 things, which separate the top startups from the others. So beyond having strong founders,
Yeah.
what separates top startups from the others?
I would say like from what I've seen so far, it's like first is, being like crazy about your customers, right? Just putting like the quality of service you offer your customers over everything else, right? It's kind of never gone wrong, especially when you figure out product market fit, and then you just like customer satisfaction is, it's never, you never go wrong, if you pay a lot of attention to that. So I would say like, that's like really important. um I don't know if this is personal for me. I don't know that lots of startup people agree with this, but and in recent times I've seen people throw it around but not really mean it. But really focusing on your fundamentals. Why exactly, am I doing this in from a business sense? How exactly am I trying to make money? I think many over the years we've kind of come to this thing where it's like, oh, startups are about like these big fancy ideas and trying to disrupt XYZ, and not necessarily building a solid business. But you have to be able to build a solid business. Like you have to build even at the even at the public company level, right? Businesses that have weathered the storms are those that, have like very strong fundamentals. Like, they they're like profitable businesses. They like, they have like really great pricing strategies. They're thinking a lot about, like how their market is evolving, and what they need to do to remain like to continue making money. Even like at the least, like how exactly am I generating revenue? And I think lots of startups don't, maybe don't think about that very early on, but they really should. Um, and I think like some, many of the best startups like pay attention to that. Um, so, and then the the third one is like, you know making kind of, again, this is probably cliche, but just building a very like solid team. Um, it's it's one of the hardest things to do as a startup, but it's one that will just keep giving, for for the longest time, just having the right people. Um, it's like in whatever capacity, from like, the what you term like the lowest position in the company to like, C-level positions, just having the right people. I remember like at my startup, I used to like say, when certain things will come up and be like, it's very possible like, anything can happen and the founders will not be around. Like, does this business keep going if that happens? Um, and having the right people, really, really solves for that. Just having the right people, and having the right people also means that, you end up having like great ideas coming from everywhere. You end up having people who are as passionate about the business as you are. You end up having people who would go, to whatever extent to make sure like customers are satisfied. Yeah, I think those, I would say those three things, like, um, being, seriously obsessed about your customers, being like very focused on your fundamentals and making sure you're building like a solid business, and then just having the right people to make sure like all those things come together. I'll say those three things. Like, are things I like traits of like of a successful business.
Yeah, that's actually really great. Those are like amazing gems for founders. And we are almost at the end of the episode.
Yeah.
Maybe if you could enter a time machine and go to the year 2000 and X and speak with Mobile Ticket Joe, What would you share with him? Just as a gem to hold on to, what's maybe one thing that if you had held on to, you think you'd have made better decisions over the past couple of years?
Uh, I would, let's see. Uh, I think that again, I'd like to think that I've been very lucky to just have I've been very lucky to have worked with the right set of people, and you know, just have like certain opportunities come my way. But I think if I could go back, it would be like to take more risks. I think that this is different for everybody, and many times we find ourselves in positions where we're not able to take certain risks because of things happening around us and stuff. But regardless, I think that and so far what I've figured is that everybody will be okay. You just have to for your own self, you have to take certain risks and make certain decisions um that you think will be will turn out great for you in the future. But yeah, just afraid to make those moves. I would say just take those risks. I took a I took a bunch of risks early on, but also there are a lot of times where I didn't do certain things because I was like, oh, it's going to affect XYZ. It's going to this person is going to suffer for for this risk I'm considering taking. But I think just taking risks, especially if you're younger. Um, it's interesting that as you grow older, you look back and then you're like, oh, I could have I could have done this thing, back then, but I was I was afraid to do it, and in fact, if I had done it, then nobody would have died anyway. So I think it would be to take more risks, to jump at certain opportunities that looked like will be so risky at the time, and take those risks. But I would also just say I've been quite lucky, especially from a people perspective, right? Like just being around the right people, having like a great group of friends. Even if it's not like that, there are a lot of them, but just just that luck and being open to certain opportunities. Yeah.
Yeah. So Yemi, you had a great group of friends like Dami. I think something like Dami in your life because I really helped Yemi's life. Yemi can testify.
Obviously.
What do you want to say, Yemi? What do you want to say?
Great friends like Joe, actually. Joe is
That's true.
amazing.
That's true. Anyway, you heard it here, folks. Take more risk. Take risk and succeed. Don't be scared. From the words of a very wise man, take risk and succeed. But yeah, we've come to the end of this episode. That's it from us. Thank you so much for staying with us to the end. Joy, this was such a great conversation. I
Yes.
took so many notes. I learned so much. And I'm just so glad that we got the opportunity to chat with you and to just learn from your experience. We don't take it for granted. So thank you so much for coming on here and sharing wise words.
We actually need to publish Dami's notes because during every conversation, Dami's like, I took such great notes. So
Yeah, because no, I'm an efficient
publishing Dami's notes.
I'm an efficient person. I'm learning. This is also a learning experience. You have to share me. I'll try it.
Yeah. Thanks so much, guys, for having me. It's a pleasure speaking with you guys. And well, I look forward to doing doing this again.
Yes, having you here again.
Yeah.
I love that so much.
As to whether or not to replace Dami with Joe because he has energy.
I'm Team Dami on this one.
Even Joy is Team Dami. It's Yemi that we should replace. Maybe me and you, Joy. Maybe we replace Yemi and it'll be me and you. Anyway, for folks that are listening, please don't forget to SST. I feel like abbreviation because I'm cool, right? Cool kids. Don't forget to subscribe, to share, and to tweet about this. So yeah, we encourage you to share with your network if you learned something, if there's like some quotable that you picked from all of Joey's wise words. You can just tweet it, tag him, tag us at Vizible Africa. That's VIZIBLEAFRICA. God, this is like a spelling bee. But you can follow us on Twitter too at Vizible Africa. And yeah, we look forward to having you in future episodes. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a good rest of your life.
I'll come back for the next episode. We're expecting you to come back. It's given.
If you don't call back, I will find you. I will find you. I will. I would do anything because I'm not a terrorist. But yes, please come back. I'm begging you. Um,